My name's Cosi, and I'm going to take you through Odysseus' decade-long journey home in a day. Welcome to Cosi's Odyssey. Homer's Odyssey is a very famous and very old story that takes place in the aftermath of the Trojan War, an epic battle between the Greeks and the Trojans that the Greeks eventually win. The Odyssey dates back to the 8th century BCE, so around 3,000 years ago. But the timeline is absolutely cooked. The archaeological record throws a bunch of spanners into the mix, but one thing we do need to establish is that all of the details are very much still hotly debated. The Trojan War may have actually happened, but obviously and tragically, all of the sea monsters you're about to meet are fictional. But what we do know is that it's an epic story all about coming home, what was known to the ancient Greeks as a Nostos journey. That's actually where we get the word nostalgia from. The other thing you need to wrap your head around is that Homer's Odyssey doesn't happen in chronological order. The timeline jumps around a lot. The first chunk takes place in the present, the middle chunk takes place in a flashback, and the third and final section takes place back in the present. Let's jump right in and meet Odysseus. Our wily, slippery hero literally washes up on Calypso's island. Calypso takes Odysseus as her lover, holding him captive on her island Ogygia. He's just been shipwrecked again. He's also a shipwreck of a man, but more on that later. Calypso has fallen madly in love with him, promising him eternal life and immortality if he stays with her. Odysseus does stay with her for many, many, many years. But he cries on the beach every day because he's so homesick. Yeah, we're supposed to feel sorry for the guy who's holed up on a deserted island with a goddess who's madly in love with him. Calypso is keeping Odysseus there against his will and literally won't let him leave. I feel like it's one of those classic, if you reverse the gender roles, how would you feel kind of situations. Let's duck to the ancient text real quick. The nymph Calypso, a goddess of strange power and beauty, had kept him captive in her arching caverns. I mean, I know my mind is semi-permanently in the gutter, but I really don't feel like I'm reaching for the innuendo here. Now, on to the speech that cemented me as a firm Calypso apologist. The gods eventually intervene after all these years, sending Hermes, the messenger god, to her island, where he essentially says, enough is enough. It's been years, Zeus is kind of over it, I think it's about time Odysseus goes home. She doesn't exactly take it well, essentially replying, you gods all just get jealous when a goddess takes a mortal to her bed, citing a bunch of examples, and she also points out how ludicrously hypocritical this whole thing is. So this is our first proper taste of Odysseus, or as some people are about to know him, hey you, behind the shrub. When Odysseus leaves Calypso's island, he washes up on the island of Scheria. Ooh. And immediately passes out on the beach. Homer actually gives us his internal monologue when he wakes up. He's wondering whether he's gonna get eaten, crushed, whacked in another gilded cage, or if he might finally be able to enjoy some alone time and maybe a bath. Homer makes it very clear that Odysseus is naked. He rips off a massive branch from a nearby tree and uses that to cover his bits. I'm not sure how comforting that would have been, or effective. Apparently, he emerged triumphantly from his hiding spot, stalking forward like a lion. If a lion was bipedal and had its bits jiggling about. He then approaches the young princess Nausicaa, who's working through a bunch of laundry with her handmaidens. Now this goes about as well as you'd imagine. Nausicaa tells this seaweed-covered creature to keep his damn distance, which seems reasonable enough. But of course, it's Odysseus, so he manages to weasel his way into her good graces with a banging bit of oratory. Young Nausicaa relents, and I maintain she's feeling a little something-something for whatever ragged salt and pepper moment Odysseus is serving up at the time. She's so moved by his noble bearing that she gives him some clothes and points him in the direction of her father, King Alkinoös. On their way to the palace, she tells Odysseus how to win her parents over. He is welcomed by the royal couple, and after he essentially trauma dumps for an entire evening, they give him a crew, a ship, and they send him on his way. Now, the trauma dumping is actually the juicy bit here. Now, chronologically speaking, this part covers the very beginning of Odysseus' journey home, that flashback that I flagged at the start. Troy has fallen, and the Greeks are all making their way home. Odysseus and his men make their way to Ismarus, the land of the Cicones. They get a bit overexcited, sort of plundering the land and loitering around asking for trouble. Trouble quickly arrives in the form of the furious residents, who attack Odysseus and his men, killing a whole bunch of them. Imagine making it through a decade-long war and then getting done in on some random raid that barely anyone remembers. Next up, they come to the land of the Lotus Eaters. Now, the whole thing with the lotus fruit is that once you eat it, everything else fades away. All thoughts of home, family, loved ones, all that just disintegrates, and all you can think about is eating more fruit. A bunch of his men eat the fruit, so Odysseus has to drag them away, locking them up underneath the ships so they don't drown themselves trying to get more fruit. After that's sorted, off they sail. They come across an island and, fueled by dehydrated desperation, decide to take their chances. What's the worst that could happen? Odysseus and some of his men find a cave full of sheep, goats, cheese, and milk. They quickly help themselves, and we have to imagine at least some of them pass out almost immediately from dairy-related food comas. And unluckily for the fellas, all of these bits and bobs did in fact belong to someone, just as they suspected. But that someone happened to be Polyphemus, a monstrous, one-eyed, man-eating giant Cyclops. When Polyphemus rolls back to his cave and finds all of these remarkably well-fed men just sort of passed out, he's absolutely furious. And so he grabs a massive boulder that only he can lift, and he puts it right in front of the exit of the cave, blocking it for all of the men, and then he starts eating them, one by one. Odysseus, the wily minx, quickly comes up with a plan, telling Polyphemus that his name is Nobody, or No One, and offering the Cyclops some of their very strong wine. Polyphemus quickly drinks himself into an absolute stupor, passing out, and once he's passed out, Odysseus and his men stab him in the eye with a sharp wooden stick, blinding him. Polyphemus starts yelling for help, but, and here's the actually clever part, when his friendly neighborhood Cyclopes, that's the plural of Cyclops if that's ever a trivia question, respond, asking who is hurting him. Polyphemus replies saying that no one is hurting me, and the other Cyclopes have to assume that he's either losing his marbles or overcommitting to a really lackluster joke, so they just leave him be. Polyphemus thrashes about for a while, but then he remembers that his sheep are actually stuck inside the cave with him. He removes the boulder, but he carefully feels each sheep as they leave, making sure that none of Odysseus and his men have decided to take their chances and saddle one of them as a way of escaping. He's really covering his bases, but Odysseus is one step ahead. Let me show you. He's actually tied the sheep together in threes, instructing his men to cling to the underside of each middle sheep, giving them the best chance of eluding Polyphemus as he administers the pat-downs. By the time Odysseus gets to sorting himself out, there's only one sheep left. But it is the biggest one. Odysseus hangs underneath it like some sort of deranged bat, and Polyphemus, after having a brief heart-to-heart with the prize of his flock, sends both of them on their way. So this is how Odysseus outsmarts Polyphemus, the man-eating, one-eyed Cyclops who, it must be said, was just minding his own business. Odysseus and what remains of his men jet down to their ship with the stolen flock in tow. Now this is where you're going to lose any respect that you've managed to gain for Odysseus so far. As they sail away, Odysseus starts yelling, taunting the poor guy that's just gone from one eye to zero, all in the space of a day. Polyphemus grabs a hunk of a mountain and flings it in the direction of the bragging, which sends a massive wave towards the ship, forcing the men back to the island. Off they go again, but Odysseus doubles down, ignoring the pleas of his crew. He keeps going, telling Polyphemus that he has been bested by none other than Odysseus, the son of Laertes. This sort of wildly destructive arrogance that Odysseus has oh so kindly demonstrated for us was known to the ancient Greeks as hubris. This sort of excessive pride could lead a person to defy the gods, or even just think they're on par with them. Call this the gods' pet peeve? They did not like it, and they would often punish it ridiculously. Polyphemus pulls the daddy card right back, but unfortunately for Odysseus and his crew, his dad is none other than Poseidon, the god of horses, earthquakes, and the entire ocean. Polyphemus prays to his dad that Odysseus never reach home, but if he absolutely has to, both he and his home better be in a right state when he gets there. And I mean spoilers, but that's exactly what happens. Welcome back to the Odyssey in a Day.